Hello, everyone out there. My name is Barret Roberts. I'm the CPG head of industry at Innovid. Just in case you're not familiar with Innovid, it is a leading independent omnichannel advertising and analytics platform that's built for television. We use data to enable the personalization, delivery, and measurement of ads across the widest breadth of channels, including TV, video, display, social, audio, and digital out of home. Our platform seamlessly connects all media with delivering superior advertising experiences across the audience journey and serves a global client base of brands, agencies, and publishers through the 15 offices across Americas, Europe, and Asia Pacific. As you guys can tell, I obviously just read that. And part of it's because I'm 90 days new to Innovid and very excited to join. I've spent the majority of my career on the media side, both at Twitter and Pandora prior to joining as the CPG head of industry, leading the CPG practice here at Innovid. Prior to that, I was actually at Unilever on both the brand and the media side. And the thing that I love the most about this conversation today is that Kate and I have spent so much of our careers on the PepsiCo business as I worked on the agency side at OMD Chicago, primarily on Gatorade, but also spent some time definitely on Captain Crunch Life and that crazy little character called Quisp, right? So with that, I think you guys have heard enough about me. Kate, welcome, and I'd love to give you a chance to introduce yourself. You're no stranger to the BI audience, obviously, but just in case people have missed you, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much, Barret. So great to be here today. As you said, we have some crossover with some PepsiCo brands, but I have now been with PepsiCo for over 11 years, which is crazy, but spent my first decade roughly in marketing on the agency side as well, worked across a number of different media shops, and then transitioned to client side working at Pepsi in 2010, where I started in the PBNA beverages media strategy team. And through that time, I have worked on every beverage that is in our portfolio, with the exception of Gatorade, where it's in a different sector for those familiar with our business. But what has been great is over the last 2 years, I've actually migrated into a new role within the organization. My remit has expanded to global, and now I cover all brands, including Gatorade, to help drive media innovation and partnership development across the organization. And it's been a fantastic ride, and I'm so thrilled. I think I have the best job in PepsiCo and maybe in the industry. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And Kate, I think, just in our initial discussions, it sounded like, yes, you've been there for 11 years, but it's absolutely not business as usual. So how do you guys make sure, pardon the pun, the soda doesn't fall flat kind of a thing, and make sure that you're kind of staying ahead of the curve, right?
Yeah, so great question. And so part of the reason that my role was built within the organization is that our leadership recognized that there's been this transition and shift in the media landscape, and we need to have a team dedicated to really being on the forefront of what's new, what's next, and what will be the best way for us to connect with our consumers. And so that's what really my job is all about, is identifying those business challenges that we have within the organization, and then partnering with either startups or with our larger investment partners to find solutions that we can then share across the organization, provide that visibility. And then with those smaller startup type of partners, whether it's integrating within our deeper partnership or bringing just across the organization at scale, that's been our primary focus. And so the past couple of years have been really helping drive that agenda and just really making it as seamless as possible. And we're now on our third rotation of what we call our PepsiCo Labs program, which is something that has been one of the best experiences I could have ever asked for at PepsiCo or just in my career.
That's the most amazing that, I mean, especially CPGs can become so large and so matrixed, right? So I love that you've built out kind of the engine within the engine to make the bigger engine work bigger, right? And better kind of a thing.
Yeah. And I mean, and it's no small feat with a massive organization like PepsiCo is. I mean, you couldn't find a more matrixed org. But we have developed this systematic process over the past couple of years that's really helped us drive this agenda in a very turnkey fashion, and really gets the exposure all the way up to our C-suite, which is really, really phenomenal. And we see it's amazing to be a part of what's changing the marketing efforts across the organization. So it's a really proud moment to be a part of that team.
Congratulations. Perfect.
Thank you.
Good. So just to set the stage for the topic of today for Brand Innovators, which is really around the future of media, right? Can you share, we're not going to play this advertising music, but can you share kind of the 15-month journey that PepsiCo brands have been on over the last almost year and a half at this point, and perhaps entering into the next chapter as we're talking?
So yes, much like every other company out there, it has been a challenging year and a half. And sadly, I don't know that we're on I was hopeful a few months ago that maybe we were going to be coming out of this quickly, but it seems like we might have taken a step back, which is unfortunate. But we've learned a lot through this process, and I think it has truly transformed the way that we will go to market in the future. From PepsiCo as a whole, we saw behaviors that we were not expecting, but we're very fortunate for PepsiCo from a pantry loading perspective. So when this all happened, we saw people buying in bulk and people really making sure that they had stocked snacks, beverages, food supplies, which really benefited us, which was great. But it also presented a lot of challenges. We did not have the resources and the staff to really ensure that our shelves were continuing to stay stocked as needed, and that we could supply what our customers were looking for. So it required a lot of shifts of resources to make sure that we were supplying our employees with the right PPE to keep them safe and to keep them protected, and really valuing the work that they were doing out there. So it was a bit of a journey. It was also interesting to see how things had shifted through this time, and products that really had a resurgence. So like Quaker oatmeal, the Quaker brand saw huge spikes in their sales because people were at home, and we're in a different, good old Quaker. But people were at home and doing things that they hadn't been in the past, where they were typically on the go. But it also changed from that on the go mention. When we are a very on the go type of portfolio of brands for the most part. And so it changed how our mix was in the marketplace. So when you think about your convenience and gas and those single serve 20-ounce bottles or single bags of chips, those really weren't what was driving our volume. And so it definitely adjusted how we had to look at things and where our mix was. And so that was definitely an experience that we needed to take into consideration as we thought for the future. On the flip side, as I mentioned, I do think it really transformed how we think about going to market, about how we allocate our media. And with people staying home, we saw an explosion in the e-com space. And I've seen different stats, but I know that we've seen over 5 years of growth in the e-com space in a 10-month period for what was trended or what we were expecting. So that really did, while we were already on a journey to accelerate our e-com capabilities internally, it definitely did help drive additional priorities against that channel. So that's something that, we are always looking at. How can we do that click to purchase or those opportunities in the future? Additionally, we saw I know I was watching a lot more TV at home. I did cut the cord during this past year. I know we saw a lot of that happening and a lot of just increased CTV usage. And so as a whole, that's a behavior that we need to ensure. And we've been on these journeys, but I think it just only accelerated. So we recognized that CTV was going to be the future, but it accelerated the need for really understanding and ensuring that we had it as a right part of our overall mix. And then I think the biggest thing that we took away from this, though, was the need for flexibility to future-proof our brands and our business as we move forward. And so when we think about the traditional ways that we had gone to market in the past, some of those really handcuffed us in what our capabilities of movement and agility are. And so it was really imperative as we thought for any future investments, that we built the flexibility, whether it's from shifting across different platforms or just the ability to pull back and reallocate as needed, given, unfortunately, I don't know that what we saw this past year is going to be the last time that something like that happens. So we need to ensure that we are really in control of what we're doing.
Yeah, hopefully the silver lining out of all this is that maybe 2020 and first half of 2021 was the practice lap, and now that everyone's warmed up and ready to go, we can kind of put it into practice. You're right. I mean, tons of insights coming from everywhere, right? During my time at Pandora, we saw obviously audio listening going way down in the car and skyrocketing, exploding in consumers' homes because people were so sick of the old voices in their own homes that they were hopeful to hear another one. And get a
it's
little
so funny, but I think it also represents so many opportunities that arise out of this as well. So on the, those are those other silver linings. It's like what really has been launched out of these tragic events.
And that's one of the things I think that's been interesting for me in moving from the media side to the ad tech side, is that now we're the pipes of how it all works, right? And so we can literally look at it at an advertiser or a CPG advertiser's campaign and see the re-expression, as you're talking about the need for allocate that flexibility and allocations and that type of thing. When we look across mobile and desktop and CTV, there was, as you just alluded to, not only in consumer behavior, but also in real time, we saw shifting happening of advertisers moving those impressions and those video impressions in a lot of cases to that behavior because it was happening. So interesting to see it happening in real time through the tech, but that's what enabled the entire transition, right?
Yeah.
The other thing you talked about was just the shoppability piece, right? And I know 10 years ago, dated, but at Unilever, we used to say, 90% of our sales are happening in store. We need to spend so much time in Bentonville and Minneapolis and get it done there, of course. And by the way, there's this e-com thing. And I totally agree with you. I have so many requests onto the other side of the pendulum, right? Of shoppability. I think in the beginning of this year, as people are kind of coming back to focusing on the in-store, it just drives home this whole point of making sure we're enabling commerce to happen in any channel at any moment. And I've begun to kind of refer to the big screen TV in your living room, perhaps as the new storefront for CPG, just because of the opportunity for interactivity. So yeah. I totally agree with your comment of all about new experiences and what that looks like. Okay, if we can transition, something that's not new is the television upfront. And amidst the history of what's happened in the last 15 years, I have to imagine that this television upfront has been like no other. So without getting into any fine details of any one PepsiCo deal, could you give us just a peek under the tent or behind the curtain from a marketer's view? How was this upfront different, and how did you navigate this time in the space, really?
Yeah, and I think I alluded to it a bit in my previous statements, but I think the upfront continues to be a place where PepsiCo will invest. We do recognize the content and the deals that we can secure there, but we also recognize that the linear audiences are continuing to shrink. That we need to find solutions to provide that incremental reach, and because of those realities, we do have this strong focus on agility and flexibility to future-proof our business. And so a lot of that is how do we find these cross-channel extensions so that we can really deliver our message to those audiences when it's going to resonate most to them, and that can be across multiple screens. How do we recognize that the growth of CTV is exploding, and it's such a huge component of what we need to be doing. But we also, through the upfront, we need to ensure it's our efficiency driver. And so how do we make sure that what we're going to market with, the deals that we're negotiating, while we see the significant value and effectiveness from a CTV perspective, we need to make sure that the increase in effectiveness isn't being offset by the premium pricing. And currently the reality is that it's still a very premium marketplace. And so while the linear space is also becoming a very seller's market, and it's been challenging because while the ratings are going down, the pricing continues to go up. We need to make sure that we're balancing and making our buys as effective as possible, because for us, we need to ensure that every dollar works harder than the last. And so every dollar that we're putting forth strategically needs to be the right dollar to reach that consumer. Everything that we do at PepsiCo is about consumer centricity and really tying back to the audience. And so that's a key imperative for us. And we know that the Upfront does offer us ability to reach those consumers, but it's one of many different areas that we need. And as I mentioned before, the Upfront historically is a very, very locked to firm type of space. We've been, our agency has been doing a phenomenal job and working with our partners to ensure that we can drive as much flexibility and agility, as I mentioned earlier, as throughout this process.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, and I think it's not just about new consumer trends and new consumer experiences, but out of all this, there's new tools I think that marketers can leverage, right? And this is relatively nascent. I mean, 45% of advertisers have less than under a year under their belts in working with CTV. So it's one of those things where, we're beginning to work with advertisers like Anheuser-Busch to make sure that they are looking at the totality of their media plan and what that looks like, looking at things like duplication between different sources and resources, reach and frequency, obviously, and then working with them to be able to deliver a result of actually cutting their CPMs almost in half, kind of a thing, or reducing by 45%. So it's absolutely not like a one size fit all situation. And I think that's been the interesting thing also in coming to Innovid, is just one, the consultative role, but then two, trying to figure out like, what is it you guys are exactly trying to get done, and how can we put the tools to work and work hard for you, right?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's not a one size fits all. We all have a challenge. Ultimately, we're all just trying to drive as much sales as possible. So that's what it boils down to. How can we make sure it helps deliver on that goal?
Totally. Hey, for the audience, real quick, I just want to give a quick reminder. If you do have any questions, go ahead and plug those into the Q&A box at the bottom, and we will pick those up towards the end of the session. So appreciate that. So Kate, on the note of CTV, and we've talked about it quite a bit already, I want to shift the conversation a little bit to not just a media delivery standpoint, but probably more importantly from a creative standpoint. A lot of the work that we were doing in audio when I was around Pandora was it was a new experience for creatives of put the blindfold on and actually just activate your audio sense. And from there, what do you want to talk to people about, right? And that was a really different experience for a lot of creative minds. As you guys are planning for the big screen and perhaps the opportunity for interactivity within that screen, what is the role of the big screen versus, as you're looking across cross-channel campaigns versus perhaps the smaller screen or the bite-sized screen or the social screen, et cetera? How do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, we see a lot of value in both the big screen and those smaller formats or different formats that are out there. I would say that PepsiCo historically, or maybe not historically, but our goal has always been about being a mobile first group of brands. We know that the bulk of our products are consumed on the go. And so it's really critical for us to be able to deliver our message at the point where it's going to resonate most with them. But I think it all comes back to personalization. And that's been another area of focus for us across the organization, and something that we've been leaning in a lot on in the past, and about just being able to dynamically deliver. And I think CTV is helping us be able to deliver it. But I think there's a number of different channels that give us that opportunity to be so personalized and consumer centric, as I mentioned, with our messaging. And through the PepsiCo Labs program that I highlighted in the past, last year's program was all about, we focus on, these big key business challenges for us. Two of the pillars that we focused on were creative excellence and then personalization at scale. And within the personalization at scale, we were able to test a few different platforms that really provide us new opportunities that we hadn't been able to deliver before. One of the partners that we piloted with a key. I hope they don't mind if I name drop them, but what we were really impressed with what they were able to deliver is this moments technology. And what they were able to do is leverage the gyroscope in your phone to understand where you were in, if you were running versus sitting back versus, walking. And so it can deliver the right message to you based on that movement so that it truly could engage, and it could deliver you more of an audio based or a video based or a static, depending on those occasions. Outside of just the traditional like geographic specifics or demo specifics and some of those other data signal led delivery mechanisms. And so I think that's something that we find really interesting. And something that we've had, unfortunately, to step away from a little bit over the past year, but I'm hoping to see a resurgence in that as well, is platforms like, gas station TV. We've seen success with that. And it's a really effective tool for a brand like Pepsi or Cheetos or Doritos, when you are at your pump and you're in an engaged situation and you've got, nothing else to do but watch the screen that's there, and it's telling you go inside for a 2 for 2, or, some sort of really action oriented creative message really drives action. And so we do look for those occasions, whether it's click to add to cart, or if it's just go inside and find those moments that really drive action. And it's all about really understanding what the person, the consumer is doing at that time, that we can connect with them best.
Yeah, to me, moments and personalization are they're white hot in CPG. I think they always have been, but the biggest difference being that now you can actually activate on it. Yeah. And we've all been doing this for almost decades in display, but I think even over the last 5 years, figuring out how to dynamically serve creative in the likes of audio, right? And now the thing that I think the majority of people that I'm meeting with are finding most interesting is actually being able to bring those experiences to video and actually make dynamic video and have different creative and messages and visual experiences for every single one of those audiences. Kate, I had spent a bit of time with John Halverson a couple of weeks ago, just talking through the Mondelez business and what's been going on there. John's big push has been around, the push towards not just driving personalization and getting organizationally set up, but also driving that strategy, not just top down from the org standpoint, but across their agency partners as well. But most importantly, around making sure that they're driving ROI along the way and showing increased improvement as they go. So I do want to segue a little bit into the world of measurement. And I think one of the things, unfortunately, maybe or maybe not, CPG tends to be plagued with is that we don't own the cash register, right? A retailer does, or a grocery chain does, or an e-com provider does. So what is PepsiCo's approach on, I'm going to refer to, broadly speaking, marketing mix modeling? Please reiterate what it actually is and how you guys look at that, right?
Yeah, so we have another journey that we've been on. It seems like we're on a lot of journeys at PepsiCo, but another one that we have been really focused on is just how do we better measure our investments. And so we have built out a proprietary tool within PepsiCo that we call the ROI engine. And it is our take on traditional MMM. I think some of the challenges we'd seen in the past is just feeling like some of the results are modeling work we were seeing was a bit antiquated in its measurement of specifically things like digital channels. And so I think through this effort, we have a very smart team of data scientists, much smarter than that I have no part of helping create, but rely on them to help bring this to life. And we're in the process, really building it out for the US and beyond. And so in the process of scaling it globally at this point, which is really exciting to have this one kind of source of truth across the organization that we can go to, that we have these direct feeds with our partners to ensure that we are getting as granular as we can and in a much more real-time basis. I think another big struggle that I hear often, and I know we were challenged with, is just the lag time in seeing some of the MMM results. And so through the development of our own tools, we're able to help fast track that. And the intent, is to get as faster as we can. So while previously it might have been a year to 9 months, maybe 6 months at best of a look back, we can now do that in a quarterly or less time. And the intent is to get to chop that time down as much as possible so that we truly are working in a real-time fashion to understand what's working harder for us so that we can optimize to just really make sure that, again, every dollar is working harder than the next and optimizing that the best way we can.
Yeah. And then knowing that there is this fixed machine, for lack of a better term, excellent machine, and that's very dynamic and real time. You guys are also, from what I understand, doing additional studies with the likes of Roku on your Quaker brand, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that study, some of the headlines there, but then also, Kate, if you can help us understand, how does a study like that then work with the ROI engine as well, right?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, we partnered with Roku. We tested a couple of brands, not just Quaker, but also our Bubbly brands, with the goal of how do we drive incremental reach to what we were seeing in our linear TV, recognizing the challenges that I spoke to earlier. The linear audiences are becoming much more concentrated. We tend to over-frequency against some of those audiences. And so through this effort, we tie it back to, with the Roku one, it was tied back to an NCS sales study as well as some brand lift metrics. But we saw, not surprisingly, I think our hypothesis going into it was that it was probably going to work. But it's great to have the proof points and the data behind it that it did. And we saw positive brand lift, we saw positive sales attribution, we saw strong ROI. But really, I mean, we saw incremental reach to the tune of double digits for each of the brands compared to what we were able to deliver with our just traditional linear TV buys. And so it really did supply us as the proof point that we can't just rely on the linear TV to help us deliver it. We really need to have these multiple methods and approaches to ensure that we have the most holistic way to reach our audience.
Yeah. Can I push on that for a second too? Because Quaker may or may not be known as the sexiest brand across the globe, right?
Oh, it's super sexy.
So it is interesting in some conversations, right? Some people may say, oh, interactive TV, that's for Doritos and Mountain Dew and Cheetos for sure, but not for other brands, kind of a thing. I mean, Kate, you work on every single brand across the globe. How do you handle those conversations? I guess for the audience, we're all kind of working to help marketers understand not only the space, but also the right thing to do for their brand. So how do you counsel them in that situation in thinking through what the brand opportunity might be, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think so with Quaker, it's a brand that's been on a great trajectory of seeing growth, but I think that there's, when we see that there's an opportunity to just help fast track that, and we think that we have a solution, that we have a strong hypothesis to do so, it's about doing a quick test. I mean, this wasn't a very long term, so how do we help them, guide them in that process, find the solutions for them, and help on the back end? So my team is really there to help shepherd the process along.
Yeah.
Because to your point, I mean, sometimes it's really challenging with some of these brands that just don't have the bandwidth to be able to help drive some of this. And so it's really on my team to as the line that we always try and say is that we're looking to find what's new, what's next, and the best way to connect with our consumers. And if we find these solutions, it's about us saying, okay, this is a brand that has a challenge that they're trying to, that they are only reaching a smaller, they need to expand their audience, they see there's an opportunity. So we think that this test or pilot or proof of concept is what is needed to help bring them to the next level. And so we're always looking for those times. And it's about having the ongoing dialogue with the different leads in the different sectors for us or business units for us to find out where their focus is and where we could potentially help with the solution.
That's what I always said when I worked at Unilever. I was looking in the audience of brand marketers of like, who's actually like perking up, or where's that hand raiser? Because we'll start with you.
Yes.
And
that always makes the process easier.
In the best way possible. And I love the ROI study. I mean, it's very similar to kind of Mondelez's journey of how do they improve ROI, the fact that you guys are digging into this and finding the proof points for your brands to show that this can work. I think similarly, Innovid just partnered recently with the ANA on a recent CTV deep dive, and the findings were pretty conclusive around how nascent this space really is in terms of the tools and moving the space forward. But the first finding just being that reach absolutely has not been maximized to date. And it just to quantify this, the average campaign is delivering about 60 TRPs in general, which if you're all familiar in how to manage those, that's relatively light. So tons of upside there. And obviously, I definitely hear your comment of, but we need to find out how to get there in an efficient way and making sure we're looking at the analytics to plan appropriately and get there, right? And that's really Innovid's job to help in that area. The second area is really just around, is there an issue around frequency and duplication? From the majority of campaigns that we looked at, there was actually, it was a bit of a misconception, and they'd found that the majority of campaigns, about 85%, delivered a 1 to 2 frequency. I think we all have seen those outliers where that's not exactly the case. And so also most important to actually use the tool and making sure that that's working in that way. And then I think the last piece is just around, leveraging the pipes that are available, whether it is your first and or third party audiences that you are using to drive performance, and making sure that we're bringing your measurement partners along the way, kind of a thing. Perfect. Good. So one more reminder to the audience, if you have any questions, go ahead and plug them into the Q&A box. And we'll actually kick it off with this first one here. It's a question for you, Kate, around what startups are included in the latest generation of PepsiCo Lab participants. And if you don't want to get specific on names, even like categories of areas that you guys are interested would be helpful here.
Yeah, well, I can speak to some that are public, but thanks for asking and for the interest. As I mentioned, it's my favorite thing that I've been able to do at Pepsi so far. And so this is my third cycle of PepsiCo Labs programming in the organization. The first cycle that I went through was all about creative excellence and creative intelligence. And two partners that we have longer standing relationships coming out of that are CreativeX, which is a digital pre-testing. It's an AI-based digital pre-testing tool that can help us be more predictive in what's going to be successful in our digital marketing efforts, because we know that creative contribution to ROI can be in the 30 to 60, 70% range. I've seen numbers as high. So there's a huge opportunity for us to just be much more effective in everything that we're doing, because I think what I've heard from most CPGs and including us is that there's an opportunity to increase our actual testing against digital, where we know that our TV or video assets tend to get much more rigor before they go live. Vidsy is another, it's a development platform that we've been leveraging more coming out of that pilot. And so it's been some efforts that we're continuing to roll out across the organization. On this last go around, we had a few different terrains. Those included personalization at scale, as I mentioned, with a key that we partnered with. And there were a few other partners that we've also evaluated and had some success with in that space. We also focused on gaming as a terrain for that effort, knowing that there are over 2.7 billion people that identify themselves as gamers, that are identified as gamers. I don't know that they would always identify themselves, but when you think of the casual gamers to the more, Call of Duty type shooter gaming, the gamut of who's playing and how many people are playing is just massive and crazy. And so we partnered with a few different companies in that space, across Anzu, which is a integration, gaming integration type of company, with Green Park, which is a real fan engagement tool in the gaming space, really interesting new space. Stream Elements, who helps tie us with influencers. And then, the other pillars of last cycle's go around was about competitive intelligence or sports intelligence. And there are a couple of partners in that space. that have been really demonstrating some amazing results for the organization that we're hoping to scale beyond. And hopefully once we have those things signed off on, I can share a little bit more insight into that. But this next round that we're actually commencing now, which I encourage people to reach out if you do feel like you have an opportunity to submit to potentially become part of the program, are all around competitive intelligence, performance marketing, and then what we're calling cultural interceptions. And competitive intelligence is really just about the idea that as everyone's continuing to migrate more into the digital space, there's such a black hole of information of what's actually being reported and syndicated on investments or efforts there. So we're looking for solutions that can help us better identify what is being spent in that space. On a performance marketing angle, I think we talked a lot about the e-com space and about how we really need to ensure we're optimizing our business. And so it's really important that we build the capabilities internally to ensure that we will be on the forefront of what we need to do to be the best marketers in worldwide is our goal, and bring more smiles to the people around the world, which is PepsiCo's mission. And then the last area is about cultural interceptions, and it's something that I think is the most interesting area because it can go across so many different areas, and I think gaming can fit in there, but it's also about how do you reach these consumers in this much more fragmented, challenging marketplace where people have the ability to ad block or to skip the channel or to use their DVR to fast through. So how do we integrate into programming or provide new ways to connect with these consumers in engaging ways that are authentic, that are not intrusive, but really can enhance an experience versus being, some of that annoyance that advertising can sometimes be.
Like moving with the flow versus completely impeding it.
Exactly.
Got it. Kate, one of the things we didn't struggle with, but we kept on having to reimagine, right? At Unilever was trying to figure out how do we not just create the center of excellence and the discipline and the thought around social strategy, gaming strategy, et cetera. It's not about just build it and like set it off in the closet in Jersey kind of a thing. So Holly has a question for you about how do you think about and structure ways for your PepsiCo experts to be visible on digital platforms? The rise of the power of the individual voice is fascinating, as employees and leaders have sometimes more cred than the brand in certain circles. Without calling out any names, probably. How do you think about this just in terms of creating the thought leadership in that space, but it's a challenge to syndicate it and get it around the world, right? So how do you do that?
Oh, I mean, scaling efforts is my number one priority. And I think to do that, it's all about like change management, and change management I am learning is the most difficult thing to do, especially in such a massive organization like PepsiCo. But I think what it boils down to is a lot of communication and a lot of finding the right message paths, the right support to really, and also the right proof points. I think you have to have a very strong use case and very strong support data for reasons to change on why this will help benefit. And as long as you have a really tight story and are connecting with the right people and continuing to share those updates, those insights, and the support to help drive it through is the way that we're finding the best way to bring it to life. Some of the rollouts that we're doing with like the Creative X platform, it's a massive effort to incorporate and embed this into our organization. And so having those ongoing discussions with the organization worldwide, and having the smaller group sessions when necessary and the larger, to make sure that everybody is informed, educated, and understands the value to the change.
Yeah. Kate, if I can, we didn't discuss this one, but I think it's important for both of us, is around the role of the agency. And you and I both came from the agency side. I always made the comment, the best marketers sat in the agency chair at some point, if nothing else, for empathy of what does it look like on the other side, but also know-how. And there's such a key component to the overall mix and how it all gets done. we used to joke about it. We would do a day of ad day on Wednesdays where there would be like 20 pans of Chinese food sitting in a conference room with the CMO all the way down on the Gatorade brand. And we'd build an agenda and figure out what do we need to work against, and let's get the cross-functional team together and go at it. In today's world, any day could be an ad day because of Zoom, and maybe that's a good thing and maybe it's not. So could you just talk a little bit about the evolution of the role of the agencies and how they partner?
No, absolutely. And it's funny, I think Wednesday must be that ad day, because that was pre-COVID. That was when I would go and sit in OMD's offices for the day on my media role while I was in the media strategy team. And the agency continues to be a huge partner for us. So we've got, our global team at OMD are such strong valued partners for us as part of the labs program, because to integrate it into our business and to ensure that we're doing these proof of concepts and pilots, we need their support and their dedication to helping drive the similar agenda. But I think we all recognize that that the traditional, I think there is an evolution to how our agency resources are, and all companies, at least I know that many companies and many in the CPG space are looking to be more self-reliant, and there is a lot more taking ownership of some of this work, but that does not mean that we don't still need and value the work of our agency partners and still will rely on them for strategic resources. They are our partners in everything that we're doing and are so valued for all the work that they do. And I know that the labs work that we've been doing could not be completed without them. And so I don't see that, changing. And I think that having a strong partner that knows your business, that you can trust through that, is really imperative to having, great success in the marketplace.
Fantastic. Pearl, welcome back.
Thanks, Barrett. Great conversation, you two.
Kate did all the heavy lifting, absolutely.
Kate's quite the rock star.